Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 9th of September 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So the biggest news of the last 24 hours is that a lawsuit has been brought against the Treasury Department in the US over the Tornado Cash sanctions, and the lawsuit is being funded by Coinbase themselves. Now, there are, I believe, 6 or 7 plaintiffs on this lawsuit, and 3 of them are here. Preston Van Loon, who you guys will know as one of the co-founders of Prismatic Labs, building the Prism ETH2 client, or I guess consensus layer client. Blast Easy here, or his real name's Kevin, who is working at Grid Plus and has been a long-time Ethereum community member, and Alexander Fisher here, who is also a long-time Ethereum community member and is also very interested in space lately. I follow him, so I see his tweets, of course. But this is a big deal, guys. I mean, Coinbase bankrolling a lawsuit against the Treasury Department of the US government over Tornado Cash sanctions, that's a mouthful, is a huge deal for obvious reasons. Now, the fact that they've got actual Ethereans on here as plaintiffs against the government, and these people have actually stood up to do this, is amazing. I mean, I put out a tweet yesterday where I said Ethereans are so based. Like, this is just so amazing that these people have putting their necks out and doing this and fighting for this, especially Coinbase as well. I know, Coinbase gets a lot of flack for a lot of things, and they're not perfect. But they're a big company, right? No big company is perfect. But I think that they're doing an amazing thing here. Honestly, I think this is one of the best things Coinbase has done recently. And I don't know if I mentioned it on the refuel, but I was talking to friends about this, saying that if we don't have these people in the industry or these companies standing up for the principles of crypto, then what are they even doing? You know, these companies make so much money from this industry. They should be standing up for things such as Tornado Cash, right? And that, I guess, like, for privacy. That's exactly what they're doing here. Now, if you missed it, you can read Brian Armstrong's thread here and the blog post from Coinbase themselves. They're not trying to, remove the sanctions, so to speak. I think what they're trying to do is show the Treasury Department that they overstepped here by sanctioning code instead of just sanctioning an entity or individuals. Because by sanctioning code, this is the first time it's ever been done, they are possibly in violation of the US Constitution, and if this kind of lawsuit goes the way of Coinbase and the plaintiffs here, then we could potentially see these sanctions being changed and being ruled unconstitutional. So I don't know what form that will take. Obviously, I'm not a legal expert here, but it could mean, and I'm just speculating, it could mean that the sanctions themselves, the sanctions against the Tornado Cash contracts themselves are removed, and they're just put on certain entities and individuals. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a legal expert. We'll have to see how that plays out there. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of like catch you up to speed on Tornado Cash as well, the dev is still arrested. I mean, I mentioned that he was arrested by Dutch authorities, and he's still under arrest for, I think, up to 120 days before they're going to charge him with something. I'm assuming they're going to drag this out as long as possible, probably till the last day, and then charge him with something that probably isn't even related to what they arrested him for to begin with. That's obviously a shitty situation there. There hasn't been any updates on that front. This is just the only update that I've seen recently, but this is a big deal. You know, I know that the crypto news cycle moves really quickly, and people died down the conversations about Tornado Cash and about the sanctions. But just because people stop talking about it in the day-to-day news cycle doesn't mean that it's still not an important issue that needs to be addressed. And I'm just, as I said before, I'm very, very glad to see Coinbase funding this lawsuit, and I'm glad to see these plaintiffs stepping up to the plate here. And on the Tornado Cash subject as well, Peter Van Valkenburg from Coin Center put out an interesting kind of tidbit here, saying, fun fact, the US government can still use Tornado Cash because there is a provision here that says, official business of the United States government. All transactions prohibited by this part that are for the conduct of the official business of the United States government by employees, grantees, or contractors therefore are authorized, as can all of these fine folks as well that can basically still use Tornado Cash and not be in breach of the sanctions, because there are exceptions here. Now, obviously, this applies to many parts of the law. This is nothing new, but the irony in the fun fact is, at the end of the day, these sanctions are put on I guess, US citizens, law-abiding US citizens, and the government, of course, is exempt from this for reasons that they're, I guess, like, you can imagine the reasons of why they're exempt from this. Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? I don't have an opinion on that, but it really just speaks to the fact that this sort of stuff really is unconstitutional in my eyes. As I said, like, I'm going to say it again, I'm not a legal expert, but from all the experts that I've read on this topic, there is a consensus around that fact. So I'm really, really hanging out to see how this lawsuit goes. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get a resolution here. It's probably going to be drawn out quite a bit. This is not something that should be taken lightly. This is, going against OFAC, going against sanctions, right? Like, sanctions are one of the, I guess, like, only tools nation states have to cripple other nation states, especially nuclear-enabled ones, as you've been seeing play out with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. I mean, if Russia didn't have nukes, it would probably be going very differently, right? There wouldn't just be sanctions. I would imagine it'd be even more than what the US is doing by giving weapons to Ukraine. They would probably be mobilizing themselves, right? Because we've seen this play out before. Within conflicts around the world. But because they are a nuclear state, because obviously putting troops in there would probably kind of not end very well, there's the sanctions, right? And the sanctions are a very effective tool. At least the US government believes governments around the world believe they're a very effective tool. So going against those things is going against the national interest, right? Or at least the national interest as the US government sees it. So this lawsuit is definitely doing that. But this lawsuit is really to show the Treasury Department that what they've done here is not right by sanctioning code. They should only sanction individuals and entities, and sanctioning code is taking it a step too far. So I'll keep you guys updated on this. I'm sure you're going to see it all over Twitter anyway. There's no need for me to update you guys on it, but I still like talking about it on the refuel because I think it's very topical. Obviously, I spoke about the Tornado Cash stuff a lot when it first happened, but as I said, just because the conversations have died down over the last few weeks doesn't mean stuff isn't happening in the background. The wheels of the law and justice move slowly, but they do move. I know it's frustrating because we're in crypto, everything moves really quickly, and then when something kind of meets the law, or meets the political process, it can move very, very slowly, but that's just the way it works in that world. So once again, very, very proud as an Ethereum to be among people who will put their neck out to fight for this sort of stuff and be plaintiffs against this sort of stuff. And I'm very excited to see how this shakes out. All right, so Stateful Works has a new blog post out here called The Merge Manual, which is a collection of perspectives from 60 plus core devs collected over the last month. And this is on Mirror, which means you can collect this post as an NFT on the Optimism Network, which I already did, of course. I was the first one to collect this. I always love doing that. I messaged Trent. I'm like, hey, I'm the first one to collect your NFT. You can see here the Daily Gwei logo. I collected it on Sassal.eth. And he's like, man, like, I can't thank you enough for your support. I'm like, it's the least I can do. The work that Stateful Works has been putting out has been nothing short of amazing. And the Merge Manual fits that description perfectly. Now, you can go give this manual a read for yourself. It is quite lengthy. But basically what it is, as described here, is a collection of perspectives from the 60 plus core devs collected over the last month around the merge, around the work that it's taken to get the merge here, and it's perspectives from, obviously all the different teams, all the different core developers within the Ethereum effort on both the execution layer and the consensus layer side of things, which will just become one Ethereum in around, 5 or 6 days here, which of course is awesome. But yeah, I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to go read it, and you can collect the NFT as well. The NFT is free. It just costs gas, and because it's on Optimism, it's a negligible cost anyway. So you can definitely go collect that if you haven't yet, and go give the post a read. I'll link that in the YouTube description. All right, so speaking of things related to the merge, obviously we've all been hearing about these proof of work forks that are potentially happening after the merge, or maybe at time of the merge. And there's been 2 or 3 of them, and there's really been one that has made a lot of noise, and that's this one called ETHPoW, or EthereumPoW, right? And as you can see here, Frankie from Paradigm has put out a tweet where he said, "We've reached the point in the ETHPoW saga where the Coinbase protocol team themselves are submitting PRs to the repo to get the chain ID issue solved, and still no response from the team." So as I've explained before, the chain ID issue is the fact that the Ethereum main network, the one we all know and love, is chain ID 1. Now, if you're a fork of the Ethereum network, you should change your chain ID, because if you don't, there's a risk of replay attack. Now, if the ETHPoW chain does not change the chain ID and stays as chain ID 1, what can end up happening, or what potentially will end up happening for a lot of people is that if you do a transaction on the Ethereum proof of work chain, say for example you sell all the ETH-PoW tokens on the Ethereum proof of work chain that were in your wallet, that transaction can be replayed by anyone on the main Ethereum chain, which means potentially your real ETH could get sold without you even doing anything because you did already do that transaction on the ETH proof of work fork. That's why changing the chain ID is so important to prevent this. Now, obviously, if you don't touch the ETH-PoW fork at all, then it won't actually affect you at all on the Ethereum main chain. You don't have to worry about this at all. And that's why I've said before, I don't think it's a good idea to touch this chain. Even if you think you're going to get some money out of it, it's probably not worth it because you could potentially lose things on the main chain. Now, another way to protect yourself from this is to basically do what's called nonce grinding, which basically means do a lot of transactions on mainnet to get your nonce up of the account after the fork happens, and then you'll have a different nonce on the ETH proof of work chain, so it won't be able to be replayed there until you caught up again. But yeah, I mean, by that point, you'd probably sell everything you wanted to sell anyway. But in general, I feel at this point in time pretty safe to say that this is a scam, this fork. Like, I already thought it was a money grab, it was an opportunistic thing, but it's a straight out scam. If they don't actually change the chain ID, then it is a scam, it is a grift, it is very dangerous, it is very dangerous to users because of those replay attacks, and at the end of the day, I don't want to support this at all, and I won't support this at all, and I'm talking about it because I want to warn you guys about it. But if I see anyone actually promoting this, I'm going to think very less of them, probably not the term there, but I'm not going to think very good of them, right? And we all saw, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you saw this account on Twitter called Gallows Capital promoting this. Like, when I see big accounts like that promoting this garbage, it really makes me question like these people's morals and what they're actually in it for. Like, even if you're a profit maxi, this could lead to harm for lots of users, so you shouldn't actually be promoting this stuff at all. So, as I said, I think this particular EthereumPoW ETH-PoW fork is pretty much a scam. I advise against touching it at all, but it's up to you if you want to. I've outlined the risks for you. I've outlined ways to protect yourself, but the easiest way to protect yourself is literally not to use it at all, and just use the main Ethereum chain that's proof of stake that you know we all know and love. Don't bother with the ETH-PoW chain. Even if there's a lot of money, I shouldn't say a lot of money there waiting for you, potential money there waiting for you. Because as I said, it could lead to you losing things on the main chain if the chain ID remains the same. And it's obviously not good if that happens. Now, I know it's hard like sometimes, and I get this from users' point of view, that let's just say you have, you know, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out random numbers here. Let's say you have a few $1,000s worth of ETH on mainnet, right? That's your stash. You've been stacking. You're all happy with it. You're happy with how much you're stacking, but you want to keep stacking more. And then let's say the Ethereum proof of work fork or ETH-PoW tokens, for some reason, you know, are worth 10% of what real ETH is worth. So that means that if you have $10,000 of real ETH, you would have $1,000 of ETH-PoW tokens. I totally understand you wanting to go and sell those things for $1,000 and then buy ETH with it, right? Like, I'm not going to argue against that at all. But what I'm trying to say is that to question, is the risk worth it? Like, is the risk of replay attacks on you, on your main account, if the chain ID isn't changed, worth it? And to me, it's not worth it at all. Like 0% worth it. Even if that was my situation, where that was my stash and that's how much I'd stand to gain, because you stand to lose everything if you do it wrong, right? So I think that it's just really not worth it. But again, if you want to do it, just be wary of the risks, and yeah, you can go do it. I can't stop you, right? I'm not trying to stop you. I'm just trying to outline the risks here. But that's the latest on that. It really does seem like basically a mess, this ETH-PoW fork. It's done by a bunch of amateurs. I don't really think there's going to be any value here at all after maybe the first few days, because people will probably try to pump it and shill some narratives or whatever. But in all, it's completely pointless. It's going to die. Nothing's going to work on it. It's best just to ignore it as much as possible. And I will only bring it up when I think that users should be informed about the risks, and this is one of those. The chain ID thing is a huge deal because of those replay attack risks, but if you don't touch it at all, then you don't have to worry about it. All right, so speaking of proof of work versus proof of stake, I put out a tweet yesterday where I said, for what it's worth, I like Ethereum proof of stake more than proof of work, but I don't want, nor will I advocate for any government to ban proof of work. Heavily regulating energy use is a slippery slope that leads to nowhere good. Let the free market do its thing. Now, I don't think this was an unpopular opinion, but it was a bit divisive, and I want to expand on this. So the reason I put this tweet out was because yesterday, there's kind of like been a study done by bodies in the US government around proof of work, and one of the suggestions was, or around crypto, I should say, and one of the suggestions was to heavily regulate or outright ban proof of work mining. I don't want this to happen at all. I don't think that regulating energy use like this is actually going to lead to anywhere good, because then you go down this slippery slope of, okay, well, this is a subjective kind of ban or a subjective regulation on proof of work mining. What's to say that they don't go down that slope and say, oh, well, such and such uses too much energy, we're going to ban that, or such and such uses too much energy, we're going to ban that, right? Like, that's what I mean by the slippery slope here. So I don't really want to see this. I'm not going to advocate for it, but if it does happen, I'm not going to be surprised. I've said on the Refuel countless times that the proof of work thing, especially for Bitcoin, obviously because we don't have to worry about it in a few days with the merge, is going to be their biggest headwind. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong about proof of work being good for the environment or whatever narrative they're kind of like pushing these days, because we've seen it play out already over the last few months. Europe is in an energy crisis right now, right? Not just Europe, like various parts of the world are in energy crises right now. So if that continues, if the energy prices keep skyrocketing, public opinion on proof of work mining is just going to get even worse than what it is now. And if the market heats back up again, it's going to be in the news cycle. So you may not see outright banning of proof of work in the US, for example. We already saw it in China, but you may not see it in the US, but you probably will see heavy regulation follow this. And it's just, all it's got to do with is the fact that public perception of mining is extremely, extremely negative, and it's just going to get worse with time. So I'm obviously very happy that Ethereum does not have to deal with this, but I do not like proof of stake Ethereum more than proof of work because of the energy usage stuff. Like, that's actually not even in my top few reasons as to why I like Ethereum proof of stake more. And that may be an unpopular opinion, because there's a lot of people in the Ethereum community who like proof of stake for that reason. And look, I like it for that reason too, but not as a main reason for me. Honestly, if I had to give one main reason, it's because, as in my top reason, it's because I think we get better bang for your buck security under a proof of stake than we do under the proof of work. And then the second reason would be that I think it's easier to thwart attackers under proof of stake than it is under a proof of work system. And I've explained why before. But the better bang for your buck security has got to do with the fact that we have to issue way less to to stakers than we do to miners to secure the network. And also we leak a lot less value because stakers don't have to sell like miners do in order to cover costs. So we keep that value in the network. It's better for the value of ETH. And obviously, as the price of ETH goes up, the more secure the chain becomes, because ETH is the asset that's being staked. So it adds more economic security there. So those are my top two reasons as to why I like proof of stake over proof of work. Obviously, there's other reasons as well. The energy use one, as I just mentioned. But I don't hate proof of work. I don't want governments to ban it. But I do think that Ethereum proof of stake is the superior solution, and is going to be better, is going to lead. It's going to be the major factor why ETH flips BTC at the end of the day. So that's a little rant there that I just wanted to go on about, because I think it's important. And I think that none of us in Ethereum should be advocating for banning of proof of work or heavy regulation of it. But in saying that, it's going to happen anyway, in my mind. I don't think a proof of work is going to be able to remain untouched by heavy regulation or remain as it is today. It's definitely going to become more regulated, and there's definitely going to be a lot of noise around it, but we shouldn't be advocating for it. At least that's my view. All right, so and I guess like the other tweet that I put out was that Ethereum couldn't have picked a better time to be transitioning to proof of stake because of everything I just said. And then Vitalik replied, and he said, the best time to move your cryptocurrency to proof of stake was 3 years ago. The second best time is now. And he's making a joke, obviously, because Ethereum proof of stake has been coming for such a long time that, we should have done it 3 years ago, but, we're doing it now. So yeah, it's just a funny kind of little joke there. All right, so Rocketpool node operators should be aware of this. So version 1.6.3 of the smart node stack is out now, which includes the latest highly recommended versions of Nimbus, Prism, Besu, and Nethermind, and has a few relays for MEV boost on mainnet built in. So I discussed this before on the refuel where I said that obviously the Flashbots MEV boost relay is going to be censoring. There are two other relays out there at the moment, Blocks Route, which is live, and then Manifold, which is going to be live soon. You'll be able to select from those. I think Blocks Route has an optional flag for censorship of OFAC transactions or the Tornado Cash stuff. And I think that Manifold has said they're not going to be censoring at all, but yeah, those options are there for you, and you'll be able to use them with Rocketpool here. And you know, it's funny. The Rocketpool has been growing very nicely lately. I've mentioned their incentives. I think yesterday, the incentives thread that Jasper put out, and there was also someone in the Daily Gwei Discord channel today that got their Rocketpool node up and running. They have a nice Grafana dashboard, so it's good to see this continuous growth happening here on Rocketpool. I mean, I think they're really coming into their own now. They have something live. Obviously, I've talked about how they've been building for a long time, but they've had something live for quite a while now. It's becoming more and more battle tested. People are becoming more and more comfortable with it. They are making it much easier for people to get involved. As operators, I actually set up the smart node stack on my own hardware on the testnet recently, and it was pretty straightforward. I had a couple of issues with it, but I was able to get those resolved relatively quickly. There were more issues with me just not doing stuff correctly, not the software itself. And it was just really cool to use it and to get it all spun up. I'm hoping to get one on mainnet soon. I remember I mentioned to you guys that I'm hoping to do this. It hopefully will happen before the merge, but I mean, it's not a big deal if it happens after it there. Yeah, good to see that the new version is out, which comes with it all of these exciting features. All right, so Aztec has put out a reminder tweet today about Aztec Connect, which obviously lets you use layer 1 liquidity on layer 2. So once you acquire Aztec ZK ETH, you still trade in the layer 1 ETH pools, not ZK ETH pools on layer 2. So no more liquidity fragmentation, but how? And they explain it in this thread here. Now, I've just obviously discussed with you guys before that I think what Aztec Protocol is doing here is extremely promising and extremely exciting. Being able to get around liquidity fragmentation and also have privacy, that to me is like the holy grail of scaling. You guys know that my two main themes in crypto are scaling and privacy that I pay attention to, and Aztec is doing both. They're scaling via layer 2 and they're giving people privacy via layer 2, while also just tapping into layer 1 liquidity as well, which is obviously amazing. So just wanted to highlight this thread. You can go check it out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is a much broader discussion that'll finish out today's episode. But first of all, I want to give a shout out to David Mihal's Gitcoin grant here. This David Mihal runs the cryptofees.info website that I have shown on the refuel countless times. I've talked about this so much. I use it pretty much every single day. This is a non-for-profit website. There is no ads or anything on it. So if you want to support him, you can at his Gitcoin grant, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to do so. Definitely go donate to him. I know I mentioned yesterday about Gitcoin grants that I want to highlight more of. This is one that I can't highlight enough. Like, as I said, this website and these websites that he's created, I have used so much. You've seen them all over Twitter. So many people have gotten value out of them, and this is something that should be supported monetarily. So if you haven't donated yet, be sure to do so. I'll link that in the YouTube description below. Now, on to the other discussion related to this. So there's not just cryptofees.info. There are a bunch of different sites here which are very, very useful. So obviously on cryptofees.info, you can see the fees generated on various different protocols, whether they be layer 1s, layer 2s, DeFi apps, whatever else, right? And you can see it all here. You can go into more details and do breakdowns of things. You can filter. There's a lot of different stuff you can do here. Very, very cool. Then he has the openorgs.info website. What this shows you is the value of treasuries within crypto. So you can see here the Uniswap treasury is valued in total at 2.8 million, with the liquid treasury being at 1.8 million because the remainder is still vesting. And then the same is true for all of these different protocols here. Then he has, I should go back here, the moneyprinter.info website, which I talked about yesterday in my bullish rant. And it shows basically all the issuance rate of different protocols and DeFi apps and all that stuff with their dollar daily issuance as well. So that's another really cool website. Then he also has ethburn.info, which tracks the 1559 burn, of course. Nice little info site here, and tracks ETH burned per block as well. And then on top of this, he's got even more here, stakers.info, which shows staking related things, which I think is still live. Maybe it's just not loading right now. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So this shows a number of validators on popular chains. You can see the different validators on different chains here. And then if I go back, there's another one called ethereumnodes.com, which is extremely useful. It's basically a bunch of different RPCs that you can use on the Ethereum mainnet, and if they are working or if they are down. So if you don't want to use Infura, or if you don't want to use Alchemy, you can go to any of these RPCs, just plug them into your MetaMask and use them on Ethereum mainnet. So obviously a very important website. Then on top of this, he also has L2fees.info, which shows you the fees being paid on L2 if it wants to load up here. Yeah, there we go. So it shows you the different fees being paid on L2 networks generally for sending ETH and swapping tokens. It'll also show you the total L1 security cost, so the total amount of dollars that L2s are paying L1 for their security. So there is so much here, and this is all done by David Mihal. That's why I say that you should definitely go make a donation to his Gitcoin grant, because these are very, very valuable websites, especially the Crypto Fees website, which is, I believe, the OG one, because you've seen it everywhere on Twitter. I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it on crypto media publications. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it in people's YouTube videos. It's just such an amazing resource, and I think that David should be rewarded for his work. Now, in saying all of that, I think, it's funny, whenever looking at these kind of websites, I've mentioned it before, you should never take them in a vacuum, right? And I've explained why. Look, looking at the fees one, for an example, you can't compare Ethereum and Uniswap in my mind, because they sell different products. Ethereum sells block space, Uniswap sells liquidity, right? Uniswap fee revenue here is basically the LP fee revenue. So it's not even going to the the token holders, right? It is only going to liquidity providers because the fee switch isn't turned on. Whereas with Ethereum, most of this fee revenue is actually being burnt, which means it is a pseudo dividend to ETH token holders. So there's already lots of differences here. And then the same is true for basically everything on this list. There are differences of how these things are paid out, where the source of revenue is coming from, all that good stuff there. So when looking at websites like this, I'd obviously not look at it in a vacuum. I'd look at it with nuance and explain to people the differences here, but it's still a great website to just get a snapshot look of things. Same is true for something like the openorgs.info website, which shows the treasuries. Now, there is a post from Hazu that you should go read about treasuries. You can probably just Google search Hazu DeFi treasuries, which discusses the fact that most of these treasuries are made up by their own native token, and that's not really a great treasury asset, because it means that the DeFi protocol itself is reliant on its own token as part of its treasury, and that's extremely volatile, and it leads to perverse incentives and things like that as well. So there are other ones that don't just hold their own token, but they hold different kinds of tokens. So you can see here that BitDAO holds ETH, it holds USDC, it holds USDT as well as its own token. Gnosis DAO holds different things as well as GNO. So yeah, that's another nuanced thing that you should definitely look at. Same is true for moneyprinter.info. I don't think this takes into account the burn, this issuance rate here on Ethereum, right? And it won't take into account other things such as lost coins and stuff like that. And a lot of the time, it may not even be accurate, because under proof of work, it's hard to get an exact accurate issuance rate unless you average it out over a year. So again, another thing that you should be wary of. But I guess the picture of what I'm trying to explain here is becoming clear, that all of these websites are amazing. They show amazing metrics, but you should always look at these metrics and then add nuance to it. You shouldn't just look at them in a vacuum and say, okay, well, such and such is this, such is that. Because if you looked at the cryptofees.info website, I think a month ago, Uniswap actually was generating more fee revenue than Ethereum. But what does that mean? Does that mean anything? No, it's meaningless, because of the fact of the matter is they sell different products, right? We don't compare companies that sell different products in real life to each other and judge them based on that. Like, I'm not going to judge my local supermarket against Apple, because that doesn't make any sense. I can't say, okay, well, Apple's earning more fee revenue than my local supermarket chain is. That means Apple is better than them. No, I mean, they're totally different industries. It makes no sense to compare the two. So the same is true for things like fee revenue. And even going further than that, as I said, there is fee revenue that goes to token holders. Then there is fee revenue that only goes to the supply side of things, the liquidity providers in Uniswap's case, right? So yeah, just wanted to give a breakdown of that to end out today's episode. But once again, definitely go donate to David's Gitcoin grant. It is one of the more deserving ones out there. I'll link that in the YouTube description below for you to do so. But that's it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.